Hi guys, it's Sophie. So today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up. Now before we even get started, there are going to be two books that won't be in here, and that is American War and La Belle Sauvage. Now both of those I will be reading by the end of December because they're the only two ones I have left to read before my Around the World. But I'm filming all of my videos on the 27th so that I have my filming done. So I'm just not going to be able to chat about them, but I am really liking La Belle Sauvage and I'm not really liking American War, so that's really as much as you're going to be able to have about them, unfortunately. So December's been a bit of a pacey month. I've got quite a lot of kind of magazines and books I normally wouldn't read, but just because this has been my last month before I have quite a completely restricted reading list, I wanted to just read some crap. Not complete crap, but you know what I mean. So I'm going to show you though like crap first, and then I've got some books that are kind of my more normal stuff later on. I've got a couple of books for my cat, the first of which is the Raw Meat Cat Food Cookbook. I've been thinking about whether or not I feed my cat raw food. I'm undecided at the moment, mostly because I don't have a meat grinder, so I'm not really sure how it would work. But I had a read of that and it kind of gave me a bit more info. We'll see how I get on. She eats kind of some raw now, so I might just keep doing that every now and again. See what I think over time. The other one I got is Total Cat Mojo by Jackson Galaxy. Now if you guys are cat people, you've probably seen My Cat from Hell on TV. I've watched all of it and yeah, it's basically like Sesame Alarm for cats, and it's all just like why your cats do the things they do. I don't know, it's been really helpful for like making my cat not do the things that she does that's annoying and making sure she's okay. So yeah, I got this one. And yeah, I think the bit that in here that interests me the most is like how to introduce cats to other cats. Whilst I don't have any other cats and I don't plan on having any other cats for the time being, that's something that has always kind of been a bit like concerning. Is it what happens if I ended up like going out with someone who had a cat and they moved in, whatever. So yeah, that was useful, but in general it's only going to appeal to a small percentage of people, I would have thought. And then I have a load of magazines here, so I'm just briefly going to go through them and show you them. I'm not going to talk about each one in any great sort of depth. I have O Comely, and this is edition 32. My mum picked this one up for me at, I think it was a festival she was at. I always like O Comely. I've got a couple more of those as well. O Comely edition 39, and they started doing illustrated covers, which I preferred the old ones, but this one's quite jazzy. And then I also have issue 40, again I actually quite like this one, even though I think I preferred the photographs. Just gorgeous magazine. You guys know I have a subscription to this one, so yeah, really like it. Then I got my first edition of The New Yorker, which I'd never read before, so it was quite interesting to go through, and it is, I don't know, it's quite different to what I thought, but I think I really quite like it. I think my favourite bits of them are like the long form pieces, like the journalistic pieces and the story. There was one by Zadie Smith and that was really good called The Lazy River. So yeah, I quite liked it. It was quite different to what I thought it was going to be, but we'll see how I go. I've got like a kind of trial, I think it's just 12 weeks worth, and it was like at a lower price, and then I'll decide whether or not I want to go on with this one. And then the last one I picked up was Gorgeous, and I'm kind of debating whether or not I ask for a subscription to this one for my birthday, and that one is Womankind. So it's such a pretty magazine. They're put together and they're all kind of about women, and they kind of focus on one area of the world. I can't remember where this one was. Tanzania. So this was Tanzania's kind of edition, and they have all of the beautiful like artwork is all kind of related to it. It's like M papers. It's just really nicely put together, and it's all celebrating things that women have done and sort of what life is like in that particular country. So yeah, I think this may be one that fits quite nicely with my Around the World, but we'll see. I'll pick up the next edition in January on my own, and then I'll see whether my birthday's in February, whether or not I ask for a subscription to this one too. And then I actually have a couple others that I've read but I've lent out already, and one of those is called It's Beautiful Here. I'll put a picture here, by Megan Morton. And this is a book of interior design, and it's really nice. It's a really nice way of doing it, because rather than just having the like glossy spread, which I do really like, they do interviews with the people who own the houses and talk about why they like their house, what house is going to mean to them, and they have some kind of set questions like what's the worst thing your house has ever done to you. That I think is quite a good question even. and they kind of take the stories and bring them to life a little bit. So I really like that one, and I've lent that one to a friend. I think she'll enjoy it as well. And then the next one I have, I also lent to the same friend, is Innocence and Others by Dana Spottier. And this is a novel about two women who are really close friends who are both filmmakers. One makes sort of these strange documentaries that kind of blur the line of what is a documentary and what should we film about, what shouldn't we. And one films sort of almost chick lit films but with a feminist slant, so sort of, I don't know, like American Pie type humour but with all kind of girls, so that kind of film. And it talks about their friendship, but mostly the bit that appealed to me in this one was the documentary and the sense of that. There's one that's very interesting that is sort of filmed where the subject is blind at the beginning and gets their sight, and it kind of describes the film being more like a voiceover with these flashes of memory. It's really good. So I really like that as a way of kind of exploring film in a book. I really like it in general, and I think whenever there's a book that contains that kind of cinematic thing that you can see in your head but you haven't seen, like An Infinite Jest, with the tape that they were watching, or what's another one? I think Marissa Pessel does it as well, and in House of Leaves there's the Navajo record, and all of this. I quite like that, of having this like cinematic element of a book that you can't reach, so I did really like that. I thought it was an interesting way to kind of do that friendship, but I think for me the biggest sort of part that appealed was definitely the documentaries. And then I have a couple that I've read for my In Real Life book club, the first of which is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. I know I'm very late on the sort of bandwagon for this one, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it is essentially a story told in sort of between rural Essex and London, about this woman, this very kind of tenacious, out of her time almost woman who is recently widowed and kind of seeking a pastime, and she kind of happens upon fossil hunting as this pastime, following on from the kind of spate of fossil discoveries that had been found down in Lyme Regis. And so she goes to this place called Aldwinter in Essex to look for sort of bones of dinosaurs that have come up through this crack in the earth, or so she thinks. And she happens across this kind of legend that sprung up at the same time of this great snake that is living in the marshes of Essex. It's kind of, I don't know, I quite liked it. I didn't like it as much as everyone else did. It's going to be another one of burial rites, I think. I didn't like the romantic element of it at all, and I didn't think it was really necessary. I didn't particularly think anything but the main storyline was all that necessary. I don't know, I generally don't like historical fiction that much, and this was one of those that kind of fell into my standard historical fiction. It's very well written, like don't get me wrong, the book itself is really well written, really well put together, the style and the place is good, and the characters are all well developed, but it just wasn't my kind of thing. I'm very much a contemporary reader, and whilst this is obviously contemporary, it's not a classic, it had that sense of a classic, and I just didn't really like that. But yeah, lots of other people have really liked this one, mixture, kind of science and magic and faith and sort of understanding and all of those kind of topics, but it just wasn't one of mine, I don't think. The next one I liked a lot more, and actually it's quite striking because I think these aren't that dissimilar of a book, and it's Elmet by Fiona Mosley. This is a story about a strange little family who kind of live on the outskirts of society. They live somewhat a traveller's lifestyle, though they don't consider themselves to be part of that sort of group, in that they live in They sort of lived in these vans with these tarpaulins for a lot of their childhood, and have eventually moved and built this house. Now this story is really a modern day kind of take on the feudal society, or that's how I read it at least, and it's discussing how wealthy landowners have this power over people who potentially aren't sort of within the system, and the kind of things that can go on to people who are part of communities like the traveller community, or who are recent immigrants to the UK and maybe don't have sort of all the correct legal things in operation to go and have other jobs, and they can have particularly low wages, for example doing fruit picking and all of those sorts of things, which has been going on forever in the UK. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and it's very much, it's got a very beautiful sense of place to it, but it wasn't really what I was expecting sort of from the cover. I thought it was going to be this kind of rural ideal, but it's actually quite a dark take on kind of the underbelly of the British countryside, which, even though I live in the countryside and I've always lived in the countryside, is something that you only rarely see sort of, you know, passing through. It's not something, even when you live it and know it every single day, it's all that obvious. So yeah, I thought it was good. I'd never really read anything about that particular community either, so that was interesting for me. And the next one that I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, which has one of the most beautiful covers of any book that I've read this year, I think. This book has done really well. Everyone and everyone's mother is talking about this book. It is kind of a story about the lives of these people in this really privileged community called Shaker Heights, who have almost built up this almost like a fairyland image of what they think America should be. It's kind of like a little utopia in this neighbourhood, and it's around people who don't fit into that and how they kind of disrupt the system, and a lot about kind of the political impact of people not fitting into the molds that are socially acceptable. I did quite like that, and I thought it was good, and I can tell why it's done so well. The quote on the front is by Jodi Picoult, and that's what this really reminded me of. I felt as though this was kind of very similar to a Jodi Picoult-esque book, and I think I mentioned in a video recently, one of my unhauls, I kind of feel as though that's not the kind of book I want to be reading anymore. It's not that this is bad, it's not. It's very readable, it approaches some really important topics, the writing is good, and all of those things, but it's just not what I'm looking for anymore. So yeah, my not raving review of this isn't necessarily any indicator that this is a bad book, because I don't think it is at all. I think it's a really solid book and a really good book, and it's the kind of book that I would suggest, like, if people, some of the people who don't read very much will ask me what they suggest in terms of like non-genre fiction. This would be a brilliant suggestion for someone who has that kind of taste, because it does approach lots of different ideas really nicely. It's really beautifully written, and I just think it's an all-round good book, but it's not for me. And the last two books I paired together because I didn't mean to do this, and I think you should read these two together. I think it was a really fantastic way to read both of these books. So I read Death by Finding by David Sedaris, and this is a book that is extracts from his diaries from the year... What year is it from? I did this last time. 1977 to 2002. So he wrote a diary for kind of most of his adult life, and he's gone through and picked out the bits that he thinks are the funniest or the most informative or representative of his life. And they are tiny little pieces. I'll try and find one that's sort of short enough to read. Like, okay, that one's a bit sad. I'll try and find one that's a bit less sad to read. So, okay. March 18th, 1986, Chicago. I voted this morning at an elementary school. The children seemed excited to have so many adults around, one of whom, an older gay man in a leather vest, wore a pin that read Dignity. One of the people I voted for this morning was named Lee Botts. Her campaign was her bottom line is clean water. Someone had tampered with the sign she hadn't put in front of the school, and now it reads, Lee Botts, her bottom is clean. So they're just like tiny, some of them are funny, like I said, some of them are sad, tiny pictures into his life. And he recommends not reading it in one go, and I went against that and I read it in one go. And I liked that, in that it gave you a real sense of someone's whole life. And I get why he says don't read it in one go, because it is actually something quite tedious and navel-gazing about going into someone's life who you don't know in that much detail. But it was a really engaging experience, and I did like it, and I will read the second half, which is volume 2 is up to the present day from 2002, because I think it was a strangely kind of intimate experience as well. Like, I really felt like I know him from having read these. But I don't think I would have liked this so much if it weren't for the fact that I then read, completely, like, didn't think of it at the time, but I picked up Ongoingness, the end of a diary, Now this is a memoir almost, a little bit like the Joan Didion kind of memoir, poetic experience, that kind of writing, about her having written a diary but without any extracts of the diary. So she does what Sedaris has done, but Sedaris has gone to put the best bits in a book and she's written about the book. So that was why this was so interesting. So she has written a diary for 25 years and this tiny little book is her talking about what it is to her and how her life has changed. I like this one more. This is one I underlined because I thought it was just really nice. So there's a bit, let's have a look right at the very beginning. She says, I wrote about myself so that I wouldn't become paralysed by rumination, so that I could stop thinking about what had happened and be done with it. More than that, I wrote so I could say that I was truly paying attention. Experience in itself wasn't enough. So she's kind of control her life through writing this diary, and she discusses kind of the ideas of memory and marriage and life, and sort of says things as though I thought my momentum led to the next person, but in fact it only led away from the last person. So she's kind of reflecting on herself in this book, through her diary, and the interesting bit is how her life changes entirely on the birth of her child, and she stops becoming someone who is so involved with herself and becomes almost obsessed with this other person, her son. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I really liked the fact in the kind of afterwards she talks about the fact that she thought about whether or not she should put bits of the diary in this book, and she came to the conclusion that it was either that you had to publish the lot or nothing, and I just found that really interesting given this. So yeah, I thought the pair of those two together was just a really fun reading experience. It's good to compare and contrast and all of those things. Yeah, so that's everything I read in December. There'll be a couple more, as we mentioned, but that's everything I have time for now. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. That's the last of my normal books. That's the last of my books that aren't around the world. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed that. I hope you've found some things you might like in here somewhere, and in the books I've read kind of in general in 2017, it's obviously going to be something completely different in 2018. So you know, stick around and see what you think of that. But yeah, I think I'm really glad I had that really rewarding experience with The End of a Diary and with Sedaris right at the end of the year, because it means I feel as though I'm like, oh yeah, I've done well, I've done good reading this year. And I feel as though I can go into 2018 without feeling any sense of I wish I'd read that as well. So yeah, hopefully you were well. Let me know in the comments down below what your favourite thing you read was in December, or what your least favourite thing that you read was in December. And I'll talk to you guys soon in my next video. Bye.